March, 1917. Eastern Europe, a cold and muddy front line. Soldiers huddled in shallow trenches, listening to distant artillery. Within hours, the line that was meant to hold firm shattered completely. Chaos spread faster than anyone could react. Spring 1917 brought little relief to Eastern Europe. The landscape was a mixture of forests, rivers, and hills, but every inch was scarred by months of warfare. Trenches cut through the land like deep scars, filled with soldiers who were cold, hungry, and exhausted. Supplies were scarce. Ammunition arrived late. Food was minimal. Clothing and boots were worn through. The men tried to maintain discipline, but morale was low. Across the front, new recruits replaced veterans who had been lost in previous battles. Many had never held a rifle in combat. They were expected to hold positions against an enemy that had studied every weakness in the lines. Officers did their best to organize the units, but communication was difficult. Telephone lines were often broken. Couriers struggled through mud and shellfire to deliver messages. Wireless sets crackled with static, leaving some soldiers with outdated orders. The strategy seemed simple: hold the line at all costs. But the reality was far more fragile. Trenches were shallow and poorly reinforced. Barbed wire stretched thinly in some sectors, and artillery support was inconsistent. Some units lacked basic supplies. Soldiers whispered rumors of retreat and desertion. Anxiety spread faster than bullets. Every sound could be the start of an attack. Every movement was met with suspicion. Nearby villages were almost empty. Civilians had fled, leaving houses abandoned and roads filled with mud and wreckage. Horses and wagons struggled to carry supplies. Officers rode back and forth, trying to maintain order, but confusion was everywhere. Even the terrain seemed to conspire against them. Frozen ground turned to sticky mud with the spring thaw, slowing movement and trapping men. Small skirmishes in the preceding weeks had already revealed cracks in the line. Reports warned commanders that a full-scale collapse was possible if the enemy struck in the right place. Yet reinforcements were delayed. High command underestimated the fragility of the front. Soldiers spent nights in fear, listening to distant gunfire and wondering if their sector would be the first to break. As March days passed, tension thickened like the morning fog. Every officer and soldier knew that the line could not hold indefinitely. Supplies, manpower, and morale were all insufficient. The stage was set for a disaster that would come suddenly, violently, and almost silently. A front that seemed stable could collapse in hours, leaving men and equipment scattered across the mud, lost to memory before the day was done. The morning of the attack arrived with an uneasy stillness. Mud clung to every boot and uniform. Soldiers stood in trenches, rifles ready, but their hands trembled. Officers shouted orders, but voices were muffled by the dense fog. Every crack of a branch or distant shot made men flinch. The enemy had identified the weakest point in the line and moved with caution. The first shells fell, striking shallow trenches and sending mud and debris into the air. Soldiers tried to return fire, but many guns jammed from mud and overuse. Panic began to creep in. Small units hesitated, unsure whether to advance, hold, or retreat. Confusion spread like wildfire. Soldiers in one trench fired into the mist, afraid of shadows that might be friends or foes. Orders to regroup arrived too late. Couriers struggled through mud, carrying messages that were already obsolete. Reinforcements from nearby sectors could not reach the center. Roads were clogged with retreating men and broken wagons. Artillery barrages, meant to halt the enemy, instead fell on empty positions or disrupted friendly lines. The soldiers were trapped between chaos ahead and disorder behind. Some tried to fight back, clinging to training and instinct. Others dropped their rifles and ran toward the forest, seeking cover. Officers attempted to rally their men, shouting names and pointing to positions that no longer existed. Entire companies disappeared from the front. Horses bolted, wagons overturned, and artillery pieces were abandoned. Every step into the mud felt like slipping further into defeat. Mistaken shots hit comrades. Messages were misunderstood. Panic accelerated the collapse. Soldiers became isolated in pockets, unsure if allies were near or already captured. The enemy advanced steadily, not through overwhelming force, but by exploiting hesitation and confusion. Every hesitation cost lives. Every misstep opened another gap. By midday, communication was nearly impossible. The center of the line had broken, leaving flanks exposed. Soldiers moved without coordination. Some surrendered. Others vanished into the forest. Officers tried to reorganize units, but each attempt was met with exhaustion, fear, and disarray. The collapse was almost invisible to anyone outside the front. No large battle formations, no heroic stand, just scattered men, broken equipment, and mud-stained uniforms disappearing into the chaos. In mere hours, the front line that had seemed unyielding was gone. Trenches were emptied, and the enemy moved forward unopposed in several sectors. The surviving soldiers were disoriented, exhausted, and scattered. The collapse had momentum of its own. By the afternoon, what had been months of preparation and defense existed only in fragments. The chaos had swallowed everything. By midday, the front no longer existed. Trenches that had been filled with men were now empty. Barbed wire lay torn and twisted. Smoke drifted from overturned wagons. Officers faced men who had lost contact with their units. The battlefield was scattered with rifles, helmets, and broken wheels. Panic had reached its peak. Casualties were high, but not all from direct combat. Some soldiers collapsed from exhaustion, mud, or exposure. Others wandered into forests or rivers, disappearing from sight. Entire companies ceased to exist as coordinated units. Soldiers who tried to regroup often found only empty positions where comrades should have been. The enemy moved cautiously but steadily, exploiting every gap. Commanders attempted desperate measures. Messages were shouted across mud-filled trenches. Reinforcements arrived too late or got lost in the chaos. Artillery fired on positions already abandoned. Soldiers who remained were disoriented. Their orders were meaningless. Fear and confusion dominated every movement. Some pockets of men tried to hold key points. But they were small, scattered, and unsupported. Every attempt at resistance faltered under pressure. Horses bolted from mud-slick roads. Wagons were overturned and abandoned. Artillery pieces lay useless. Even the strongest positions fell quickly. Reports of missing soldiers poured in, but no accurate tally could be made. Some units were cut off entirely. Others surrendered or vanished without a trace. The collapse was almost silent, a steady erosion rather than a loud battle. No heroic last stands. No triumphant counterattacks. Only disarray, mud, and fear. By late afternoon, the front was gone. Trenches were empty. Soldiers were scattered, lost in forests, rivers, and villages. Supplies, weapons, and equipment were abandoned. The enemy advanced without significant resistance. The defensive line that had seemed permanent existed now only in fragments and in reports that struggled to describe the chaos. The collapse was swift. Hours had undone months of planning. Men vanished. Positions disappeared. The battlefield was silent except for distant, sporadic gunfire. What remained were empty trenches, broken equipment, and the faint traces of a line that had been expected to hold. In this brief period, the front ceased to exist. The destruction was absolute, yet unnoticed in the grand scope of the war. Men were gone. Orders failed. Lines vanished. The disaster left only silence and mud where once thousands had stood. The morning after the collapse, the battlefield was silent. Trenches that had been filled with men were empty. Footprints led into mud and vanished. Rifles lay scattered. Helmets lay upside down. Wagons were overturned. Horses had fled or been abandoned. Soldiers were gone. No one came to gather the dead. No accurate report recorded the missing. Entire units had ceased to exist. Officers tried to organize what remained, but the lines were gone. Letters were lost in mud. Messages never reached anyone. Communications were destroyed. Positions could not be re-established. The front was no longer a front. The enemy advanced slowly, yet without opposition. Empty trenches passed unnoticed. Barbed wire sagged in the mud. Artillery pieces lay where they had fallen. Smoke rose from overturned wagons. The land was still, except for the occasional distant gunshot. Villages near the front were quiet. Houses abandoned. Roads empty. Locals returned cautiously, but the soldiers of the collapsed line were gone. The fear, confusion, and exhaustion of the men disappeared with them. Stories were never told. Names were crossed off rosters and never replaced. Memories faded almost immediately. Maps no longer marked the line. Reports ignored the collapse. Officers recorded only fragments of what had happened. The disaster, brief as it was, became invisible to history. The front that had broken in hours was gone. Only the mud remained. Only empty trenches. Only abandoned weapons. Time passed. The land healed slowly, but it held no memory of the men who had disappeared. Trees grew where bodies had fallen. Fields were plowed over. Silence replaced the shouting. Nothing recorded the terror. Nothing recorded the flight. Nothing recorded the men lost in those hours. The collapse left no heroism. No grandstand. No last-minute order changed the outcome. What remained was emptiness. A line that had existed, then vanished. The men were gone. Orders failed. Trenches disappeared. Equipment decayed. The front was forgotten. Erased from memory. The land kept only shadows of what had been. The chaos, the panic, the fear, all vanished. Silence stretched over the battlefield. Hours of terror became nothing. Only emptiness and mud remained. These stories are rarely told. Subscribe if you want to hear the next one.